licensing perspective on the big pharma side, how they look at technologies maybe a little bit differently than the university researchers.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Jay. Well, and because one attorney isn't enough for our panel, we have David Scott with us. David, if you'd like to give us some information about
Sure.
what you do in the world of tech transfer and a bit about
yeah, happy to, and apologize to everyone on the line to have two lawyers on one call. I mean, just painful enough. And I think if you add all the doctorates up, we got, I don't know, 4 or 5, something like that. So apologize for bringing two lawyers to the table. I'll be the second wheel on that. So my background quickly, just in sort of things I've done. So I've actually started a company. It was called Verigenics, where we license technology out of the University of Tennessee into the company. So I've actually been involved with a startup that licensed tech out of a university, helped grow that company. It's now out of business. Unfortunately, my payday was a big fat check of zero. But it was sure a fun ride, and I know several of my friends have licensed tech out, and their businesses are still going out of the university setting. In my day job, I work with Quentin as well as Christy quite a bit, and spend most of my days trying to find awesome entrepreneurs that have really interesting problems they're trying to solve. And I talk to them and try to really understand what those problems are, and then look at the opportunities that we have at TechLink to bring a solution that somebody else has invented to try to apply it to that solution. So I think that's the neat part of tech transfer, is you get to engage with all these great people like are attending today that are thinking about these big problems and how do we fix the problem. And then tech transfer, to me, it's just a way of bringing yet another solution to apply to the problem. And then once you get that done, you've just got more horsepower to go solve the problem to make the world a better place. So it's a fun space to be in. And just by way of a little bit more background, I'm very much involved with the startup community across the country. I mentored a bunch of accelerators and raised capital and invest capital. So I'm kind of more focused on the commercial side than the defense side generally, in terms of how do we get this out into commerce, into business. It'll boomerang back to help the Department of Defense, which is, what Quentin and I are both kind of tasked to do in our roles at TechLink. That's my backstory.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, David. So
one last thing, I did in the chat put my LinkedIn. So anyone on the call who wants to connect or ask questions afterwards, my LinkedIn's in the chat.
Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you, David. I have a question that's already come up real quick for Quentin. If you don't mind, we can go ahead and bring up a question from the group.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Dr. Abelpour, is that correct? Did I say that correctly? I think I've unmuted you. Let me try to unmute. And you should be able to question now that you have.
I'm so sorry because my camera have a problem and cannot have a video meeting. But
that's okay. We can listen to your voice. That's fine.
Yes, I just want a question about a cooperation between other country and your university about a smart technology. Okay, for example, a company make a basic or find a new theoretical method, okay, and the need for the tested in your country. But which way or how we can help some problem?
This is about technology transfer between countries outside of the United States.
Yeah, I think
in the USA. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I understand the question. The question is, how would you engage as a non-U.S. entity with some public, I'm presuming public institution that has testing capabilities for this novel material? And the short answer is that the first step would be to identify the institution that has the requisite skill sets. Most, especially the larger universities, will have core facility listings. Their websites will direct you to these pay for, fee for service testing capabilities. So that's the first thing, is to identify the group at a university in the United States that has the skill set that you need, whether it's the unique equipment. For example, at Montana State, we have a group called the ICAL, and I already forget what that acronym means, but they test materials all the time. They have a lot of very expensive equipment, and you can go to their website and you can connect with the director of that laboratory, and then you can identify what tests need to be performed. You would figure out how much those tests would cost. And then at that point, the laboratory director would work with a tech transfer person at that university to develop what most likely would be a testing services agreement or some other type of collaborative research agreement. And it would identify, the materials you would hand off for testing. It would identify the cost for the testing. It would identify the types of results you would expect from that testing. And then also it would provide the owner of the material with assurance that the testing laboratory wouldn't use the materials for other purposes, right? They wouldn't take the secret sauce of this new material. So it provides some protection. All of that would be included in the agreement. Now, the other thing that would be considered in a situation like that would be export control concerns, depending on the nature of the country. There's always some concern when engaging, particularly with Department of Defense capabilities, which countries we're dealing with and the materials that are coming in. So those could also be navigated around, but generally that would be the step, is to identify the university that has the capabilities, and then identify the point of contact, the director of that laboratory, and go from there. So hopefully that provides the question. We do this type of service at Montana State University all the time, testing services, and it's a fee for service. The owner of the material or the technology retains all of their intellectual property rights, and what they get back in return for the cost is the analysis that they're looking for.
That seems pretty relevant to whether they're outside of the U.S. or not. A lot of that process overlaps there. So, but since we are speaking primarily about the SBIR and STTR programs and how partnering with a university or a research institution or other partners can help, we do want to focus on that, more of those areas. But happy to take any other questions offline too. Christy, back to you. Thank you so much for fielding that question for me.
And do we have any more questions at the moment? I do see one from Sarah, which I will address. Thank you, Sarah. So Sarah's question is for me to tell a little bit more about myself. So I'll do that so you know who I am and you know how to access me after our panel discussion is over. I've been working in SBIR in Montana for, I suppose it's been nearly a decade now. I was the program manager for the state of Montana SBIR program before it transitioned to TechLink. And then I became a consultant to the TechLink SBIR program a few years back. I am one of a handful of people that Anne reaches to support her SBIR clients, mostly companies in Montana, but some Department of Defense SBIR clients as well. That's sort of on a case-by-case basis. And Anne reaches to her consultant team to help companies figure out whether or not SBIR is right for them, help with the registrations, help with the application, understanding the solicitation, finding a topic, and putting together your team. So after the classes that you've attended on the road tour event, you're more than welcome to contact Anne if you'd like some further support. And she will, if she doesn't handle it herself, she'll reach to one of her assistants, consultant team members to help you get to the next level in wherever you are with your SBIR program. I'm a certified licensing professional, and I also operate as a technology manager, new to the TechLink licensing team. So I help companies obtain licenses to use military technologies in their research or product development, and function in that aspect as well. So there's a little bit more about me. Thank you for asking, Sarah. I'd like to now turn the focus to Jay. And Jay, if you would please tell us why technology transfer could become important to an SBIR company. Why doesn't an SBIR company just simply apply for the award and do the research? What do they need tech transfer for?
So that's a great question. And we have at Inimmune, which we started in 2016, I think we've been awarded 4 or 5 now, SBIR Phase 2. We have a Direct to Phase 2 award, both grants and contracts. So as a company, we're about 80%, I think 89% success rate so far in our SBIR submissions. And part of that is because of our great relationship we have with the University of Montana and the University of Montana Tech Transfer Office. Ensuring that we have access to the data from the university needed to put in a competitive SBIR, who owns that data and how that knowledge is transferred and the know-how. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay. It was paused there for a second.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, was important in starting our company and how we manage those first SBIR contracts. Based on the SBIR review panel, some of them are made up of primarily academic scientists that may review the technology but not have a great insight into the intellectual property or licensing part. But there's often some industry participants on those SBIR review panels from NIH. I don't know about the DoD ones, but oftentimes they are very critical of the IP status and freedom to operate of that technology, because it is a small business innovation grant, not a research grant. And oftentimes university professors will write one because they have an LLC they set up just for that purpose to get that 30% pay line, but not have any rights to the technology over the company. If there are people on the review panel who are IP attorneys or people from companies, they'll usually catch on to that, and those SBIR applications will not score as well. Or could be thrown out if they feel they don't have freedom to operate because there's other IP in the space and the company has not done their due diligence.
Do you find, Jay, that universities are amenable to being an SBIR partner? And if there are complications, where do you find those arise?
Yes, because the partnerships that we've developed at the University of Montana, where we've helped people and partnered with them in writing an SBIR, those are the faculty who are in front of that curve and understand the relationship between the university and the company. And so the university supports that, and we get the option agreements or licensing agreements or letters of support in place that are needed to make sure the SBIR contract is successful or grant. And as a partner, the university, usually gets a sub award coming off of that, whether it's an STTR and is the university's integral in it, or even an SBIR that the university gets a sub award to. That helps with that relationship because then the university is also generating indirect returns off of that SBIR. And if there's a licensing agreement in place, the university has usually future milestones and royalties associated with that technology moving forward. So everybody benefits.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. David, can I throw a question your way?
I was saying yes, and then you couldn't hear me. Yes, absolutely.
Yes, no, I was reading lips. I knew you were trying to press buttons here. David, can you tell us the advantage, perhaps, in the sense of commercialization that
Sure.
a company might have by bringing in a technology that they didn't invent themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple of real advantages that happen when you do bring in technology from outside. So there's the idea of time to market, right? So a lot of early stage companies want to be first to market with their product, their solution, their idea. And if you can bring in technology somebody else spent all the time and all the resources and all the money developing, and it sort of lands in your lap, and you can kind of move from that starting point, you don't have to spend all the time and effort to get to that starting point. So I think it can help you get a really great product or solution to the market faster. I think that's one of the potential benefits of commercializing somebody else's intellectual property. So that can really give you a competitive advantage. The other thing is if you've got a company, in the healthcare, med tech space, or really in any of these spaces that are really patent and IP protected intensive, you probably have a lot of other companies out there adjacent to you doing things close and nearby. And bringing in somebody else's patented technology can kind of give you a little stamp or larger piece of turf that you kind of can operate freely in. And so the more of those you can kind of piece together lets you know that you can build products and services in a space that's covered by not only the technology you may have developed, but also the technology you've licensed in. And I think that can be a really interesting competitive advantage, sort of proactively. Flip side, and this is going to get a little legal speak, so I apologize again for having too many lawyers on this panel, but there's this concept of a defensive patent portfolio. So a lot of times a startup will get going and they'll start to get their product and service out there, and then they'll get a letter from a big company or a competitor that says, hey, we think you're infringing on our patent. If you get one of those and you're just sort of fighting by yourself, you can kind of get stuck. But if you've licensed other people's technologies in, oftentimes those organizations that have licensed the technology to you will kind of help you, maybe in the background, maybe not in the background, defend at least the turf that is impacting their particular patent. So I think there can be an interesting play there as well. So those are probably my top three if I had to pick a couple.
Great answer. Thank you very much. And I have to say that one of the things Ann and I always coach SBIR companies to do is to find themselves an IP attorney or someone who has quite a bit of experience in intellectual property, if not a specialty. Because although we joke around a lot about lawyers and having two on the panel specifically today, the truth is it's a very complicated legal world. It involves technology transfer, involves complex, sometimes agreements, exchange of money, exchange of intellectual property, obviously, which can determine the life or death of a company, and has to be handled with specialized care. So Ann and I always coach our companies, as I said, to spend a few $100s at least in having an interview with an IP attorney, so you can understand the landscape a little more, you can understand the expectations, you can understand your responsibilities on your side of the deal and the responsibilities on the side of the folks you're entertaining as potential intellectual property right resources. So we're lucky to have these folks at no cost to us today to offer their feedback on tech transfer and SBIR in particular. So all jokes aside, thank you. We love having you here.
Yeah, and one thing just to sort of piggyback on that comment. So we haven't dived in. We use this word intellectual property a lot, and I don't know where people are in the attendee list on knowing what those things typically are. And I'm not going to try to give a law school dissertation here, but that usually means a trademark, which is something that distinguishes your brand or service from somebody else's. Think Pepsi and Coke. A patent, which usually protects a method or a way of doing something, a process, a procedure to make something, and so that gives you the opportunity to, once you get a patent, to sort of be the exclusive user of that technique for the term of the patent. So that's a good one. You can also license software, which is sometimes copyrighted, often isn't patented, but you can do software licensing as well. There's a bucket called trade secrets, and I'm sure there's a handful of others. But we're usually, when we talk tech transfer, we're usually transferring a patent or software, and occasionally with those two things, we're transferring a trademark, typically. So just sort of in that framework. And you can go Google and look at all that kind of stuff in the background if you want to learn more. Definitely a great idea, early stage, to at least identify who your IP lawyer might be. You can usually go find those people and have that first conversation for free and just go talk to two and pick one, talk to three and pick one, so that when you have a question, who you're going to reach out to.
Yeah, that's a great point, David. And actually, folks, so folks, I will be sending out some more resources about intellectual property, especially those for SBIR applicants here afterwards, more resources that you can tap into. We do webinars and seminars when we can meet in person. Here on intellectual property, help, bringing in an outside attorney. And I was raised with attorneys, so I feel very comfortable in this, not one myself. But I do have a question that came up, and it does touch on software. And actually, it may be a little bit more you and me, Christy, in terms of answering it. But I definitely want to have the team here chime in. I think it was sent just to me, so I'll read it here. It says, can any software technology company sign up for an SBIR grant? And I'll say, or contract. Remember, if you joined earlier, there may be contracts or grants available depending on the agency. So I'm going to say yes, as long as you qualify to participate in the SBIR program. Yes, as a software, there's a number of software that has been funded with SBIR funding. How does one get their product in front of the SBIR committee, and what's the best first steps to start this process? We are an architecture, engineering, and construction software company developing an automation tool for Revit software. So in many ways, I think that comes out less as a technology transfer or intellectual property, but really how, as a software company, would you position yourself for SBIR? What are maybe some special things that you want to consider? And I will maybe pull back a little bit in terms of looking to the resources. If you're a Montana company, reach out to me. We can walk through the process of investigating which agency might be the best funding agency for you to consider, and look at their topics or their portfolio of research that they typically fund. Those are going to be the first steps. Which agencies may be the right fit for your solution, and then looking at open funding opportunities and how you kind of following the next steps there. But in light of that, do you guys have any thoughts about software transfer? I know that we have some of that within the university, Montana State University. I know of spin-out companies that were related to software. Any special things that people need to be aware of when they're getting funding for software?
Quentin, you want to take that?
Yeah. Thanks.
Well, I can try. I mean, I don't know if it's something related to funding. I think the answer to the question was, as Ann put it, it's finding the right topic and making sure that your solution, whatever it is, matches the problem that they're trying to identify, the funding agency. In working with universities and federal government, there's of course lots of things you need to consider when you're talking about copyright and software. The first concern for everybody is it contaminated, or is your product or the software that you might be in licensing contaminated with some type of copyleft or open source requirement? So those are the types of diligence that folks in the software space will be looking for. It's the first question we ask when investigators bring software to us is, who owns the title? Where did the code come from? Because to effectively transfer it, we want to make sure that we have the full ownership rights that can be transferred and commercialized. The other issue that frequently comes up in the tech transfer space relating to copyright is this concept of derivative works, which is a very complicated, it's got a lot of legalese there. But again, folks in the copyright space are probably familiar with this phrase. Derivative works allows a licensee of a copyrighted work, whether it's software, picture, music, whatever, to build additional copyrightable work around it. So if you took a picture and someone built a collage out of that picture with other pictures, the new work that incorporates the original work is called a derivative work, and it gets really complicated, but the new work is entitled to its own copyright protection. And if your original work, it can create some concerns for your ability to manage how that new work that incorporates your original work go out in the world. So those are probably the two biggest issues. I would just kind of piggyback on this notion that David and I can't give legal advice. Really, none of us are giving legal advice here. So we just give that disclaimer. That said, I think we're always happy to standing by to answer just general questions. I put my LinkedIn in the chat as well. So that's the short answer. I think those are the two concerns: is ownership, chain of title to make sure it's clean, and then to be aware of this derivative work concern when software is flowing between ownership through licensing.
Yeah, and just to sort of follow on that, I one of the companies I was involved with had some software infringement issues and things that that we had to really focus in on, and a lot of it involved bringing in third-party open source software into code, and then and somebody else had done that and then sold us a piece, or we bought a piece of it, and so there can be a lot of problems with the open source world, and a lot of software right now is being built using open source architecture. And I don't want to get into the jargon of that, but you can go Google what is open source software. It's basically community built, nobody owns it. And if you bring even a little piece of that code into what you're trying to build or somebody else built, it can really screw the whole thing up. So you really need to understand, if you're doing software, what open source is, what the licensing requirements are around the piece of code you may be bringing in, and just make sure you know what you're doing. In companies I've worked for, we had I would always impose a policy just to try to protect the company of no open source. Like, you can go look at it, but you got to code your stuff yourself in the way that we do it and document it so that it's ours. Because open source just can create a lot of problems if you're doing the licensing.
There are a couple of questions that came over the Q&A, and I just want to make sure I get them out there here real quick, Christy.
Thank you, Ann.
One is, if you already have existing patents and limited fiscal resources, who doesn't? We're startups here, related to software, and I'm going to maybe say broaden that even outside of software, but this says related to software, would you pursue additional patents or trademarks for your product? If you have patents, why should you also look at additional patents or trademarks? And they're really, because they're addressing different components of your overall brand and product and protection.
I'll speak to the trademark question. I think trademarks are fairly easy to get, and they're fairly cheap. It's a 6 to 9 month process typically to get a federally registered trademark, and the filing fee on them is a couple $100. You get a lawyer to help you do it, under $1,000 typically, to try to get a trademark application in. And if you think about Pepsi versus Coke, that's a trademark distinction. It's your brand. And so I think getting solid trademarks for product companies, especially consumer-facing product companies, is money you should always spend. Because you've got to have the brand that distinguishes your product or service from somebody else's. So I would say always spend the money on trademark. Always is one of those loaded absolutely words. So everyone's unique, but I would skew in the direction of getting a trademark. The patent question I'll throw up to the panel, but patents are more expensive, they're longer, but they're more valuable probably for most early stage companies. So that's a tougher one, I think.
Jay, if a company already has a nice little portfolio of patents, why would they make the investment of more patents or even other kinds of IP like trademarks and copyright?
I can speak to the patent side because being in the biotech drug space, I mean, patents are our lifeblood, essentially. If you don't have patents on something, you're not going to be able to raise investment capital to move something through phase 2 and phase 3, because the day you launch after your phase 3 study, you'll have generics come into the market and erode any profits you could potentially have after spending hundreds of millions of dollars just to push something through phase 3. So you just won't get the initial investment. Most of our patents we end up with in the pharmaceutical industry is a patent portfolio. It's oftentimes not a single patent. You might have, and I give the example of a place you can get into trouble, and that is you have a new chemical entity that you have, and you have a composition of matter patent. That is a patent that describes that specific chemical compound, and you have a patent on that chemical compound that your chemist designed and synthesized. Now you can issue use patents on the use of that chemical across a variety of different uses. You either do that as you come up with new uses, or you publish it. Because if you do an MTA with another company and provide them that compound, and they use it for an indication, they can patent that use and block you out of that space with your own compound. unless you see that up front and get a license back to your company for any use patents that come out that to prevent that blocking. So you end up with a portfolio of patents around a technology that both protect the technology and the use of it. And you also have new start dates to those patents, which then extend the life of your patent family. If you do end up commercializing a product, you have patent protection for you have a longer period of time to recoup the long investment cost to move a product through the different phases of clinical trials. So we often look at an initial patent as initial composition of matter patent, and then we have follow-up use patents around the areas where we want to commercialize.
So I'm going to riff off what Jay's saying is that patents aren't positive rights, they're negative rights. They exclude other people from doing what you've claimed in your patent. So just because you have claimed some space doesn't mean that somebody doesn't occupy a little bit of that space as well. There's overlapping issues. So so the negative concept of patents is not equivalent to a freedom to operate, as Jay was pointing out, that to do what you want to do, sometimes you really need to look at the field to see who else has patented what, and maybe work with those other entities to cross-license or build this portfolio that not only excludes and preserves your monopoly in a space, but actually allows you to operate in that space as well. They're not synonymous,
Right.
Patent rights and a freedom to operate.
Yeah, and another way of saying that is sort of getting a patent is a right to sue to stop other people from doing what you're doing. So if you have a patent and no money, I can copy you all day long, right? I'm violating your patent, but you can't stop me because you have no money to sue me, right? So there's just practically speaking, more patents cost you money, and then you have less money to enforce the ones that you have. So I think.
Yeah, and we're getting. I'm sorry, guys. I'm gonna be the moderator's moderator here in terms of we are closing out just 2 more minutes here, and I want to thank everyone who has joined us on the panel. Jay, I think Jay brought up a great point in terms of the protection that patents can provide you for credibility, not just with your SBIR, but also with future funding mechanisms. Perhaps that's really important. How you protect your IP is typically something that's addressed and asked for in all of your SBIR proposals. And again, that's where Christy and I and our team, Ed and Jim and others on our team can help as you're looking through this. This is definitely opening up. I had a great webinar with an actual acting patent attorney, intellectual property attorney earlier this summer. I'm going to do another one soon, and I'll invite all of you there where we talk about trademarks, patents, copyrights, trade secrets, protections, and then also how that crosses with SBIR data protections. They're different, but they're really important for you all to know. And we really didn't get into this. We really wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to introduce all of you to things that, looking at technology transfer as a potential way to broaden the scope, open up more doors to team members, more, advanced technology, basic research being able to bring instead of starting from scratch. There's so many great ways to look at expanding your team to make your team as strong as possible with an SBIR proposal. So I thank each of you for joining this first panel. Our next panel on this channel, this WebEx channel, will start at 1:30. So you are all welcome to kind of jump back off and jump on. I know that at, I think at 1:15 Mountain Time, there is a short 15-minute on the Zoom platform presentation from the Federal Lab Consortium. Speaking of technology transfer, that's another option. Besides universities, the federal labs like Quentin and David and Christy are available to help with. They have a number of different resources for technology transfer out of federal labs. So you may want to jump on that if this is a topic that's of interest to you. But otherwise, I'll see you all back at 1:30. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, David, Quentin. I really appreciate you joining. So we'll pause for a bit.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Everybody. Again, I think David mentioned it as well. Please feel free to reach out to us directly if you have questions or if you think there's something we can help you with.
Yeah, please don't get me involved. Just go right to them.
Yeah.
All right.
So Ann, are we on break now? Is that that's the
Yes,
concept?
we're on break for a half an hour, and that I just kind of the schedule. I just wanted to keep the one WebEx open here. So
Yeah, you bet. So well, I saw Clarence O'Berry had a question that came through.
yeah, you know what? And I didn't mean to completely. Clarence, if you are still on, I'm happy to let's see.
Well, I can see the question. It looks more like the question relates to, I think, what David was mentioning at the end of his talk was, what's the issue with the USPTO and invalidation of patents? And I think David kind of was alluding to the fact that patents are only as strong as your ability to enforce them. They're expensive up front to obtain that limited monopoly that the government grants you for your invention, but they're equally, if not far more expensive to enforce. If you find someone who's infringing, the first step is the bluffing, cease and desist type letters. Hopefully that can be sufficient. But if you're going to file an actual patent infringement suit, the first thing you consider is, has that person made money off of their infringing activity? And this is true whether you're talking about trademarks, patents, or copyrights. The first question is, does it make economic sense to file some type of infringement suit? Will you cover the costs? Now, for patent infringement, I mean, the number that gets thrown around is frequently about $1 million to get started, to really pay for all the attorneys, the litigators, all the data, the discovery, everything that comes into presenting that case. The USPTO and I forget when the American Invents Act came through, 2011 or 12, has also instituted these other proceedings, and Jay may even have more direct experience with IPRs or inter-party review types of process. But these are opportunities to go to the USPTO in a much less expensive mechanism and request that they re-review the grant of a patent. So if you see a competitor that has a recently issued patent, or your competitors can do this for your patents as well, they can petition to have a review of that patent in light of the existing landscape that was present when the patent was issued. So they can go back and look at papers, publications. There's all kinds of bases for which the USPTO can say, oh yeah, on second thought, we shouldn't have issued that patent, or we shouldn't have issued these particular claims. So I think in short answer to that question is yeah, frequently the patent landscape is dominated by big companies with lots of pockets and lots of lawyers. So that side of it can be very skewed to the well-resourced larger companies. The flip side is that, when you're starting off, that patent, the value in securing investment and presenting your SBIR proposals, having those intellectual property rights in hand, they're clearly worth the investment in trying to secure the patent or the license to the technology that you want to commercialize. One last point for that is that if you are a patent owner, and let's say you're not well resourced, but you've done that diligence and you know that your infringer has made significant amount of money, well, like any other business opportunity, there are folks out there who will invest in an infringement suit. They'll come in almost like an angel or some other type of venture capital, and they'll invest, sponsor your infringement suit in return for a share of the proceeds if you successfully win that infringement suit. So there's some creative opportunities out there. You don't necessarily have to be rich, but as the question suggests, the strength does come to those patent owners that have money to enforce their rights in court. Hopefully that answers the question.
I hope so. And I think he heard most of it. I think he had to jump off, and he was on for a bit. So.
Okay, cool. Well, hey, thanks for the opportunity, Jay. It was nice to actually kind of meet you virtually. Our paths have crossed virtually, but I think this is the first time we've been on the same call.
I believe so. I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, I took the liberty in the chat of throwing up my TechLink website and our university tech transfer. I was looking for Zach's site or Paul's site there at U of M, because one of the questions that was coming up was, how can we look at a university or a federal laboratory and see what technologies they have available for license? There are websites. The Google is still probably your best bet for looking for.
Yeah, that's a hard one, as you know. Every university has a different way. So whether it's going to Autumn or going to Bio or other media to try to sell university technology, that's usually not the best way to do it unless you're a big pharma company searching for something. But if you're a big pharma company, you want to develop a new drug for diabetes. Your researchers are going to know the university leaders in the diabetes space, and they're going to reach out to you directly for a collaborative research agreement or sponsored research agreement, or what IP you have in that space based on publications. It's hard to go out and sell your technology from a university out to companies. It's more likely for companies to come find you, or the university researcher to contact companies in the space. It usually comes to the researcher, not through the tech transfer office. So
typically that's true. So I think the unique thing about the TechLink as an entity is that we are the primary marketing platform. So if you go to our website, what you'll see, it's a searchable database of the entire Department of Defense portfolio, which is unique. You're not going to find that for universities. There are a lot of pay-to-play types of marketing organizations that will advertise universities, but I think you're absolutely right, particularly in the life science space. They're not just window shopping. They have a specific target that they're looking to focus on, and they'll reach out directly.
Yeah, and we did that with GSK. I mean, we had lots of people send us the one-page sheets on technologies, but oftentimes the things we found, we were finding ourselves by reaching out to university labs that were publishing and actively working in the space that we were interested in securing IP in. And we oftentimes initiated those conversations.
I think it works both ways too. I mean, whether it's the company and their R&D department knowing who the players are in academia or government, and vice versa, they know who the active publishers are in industry as well. I don't want to continue on. I don't even know if anybody's listening, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I think we're all listening.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm curious because Jay, you've got such a wealth of experience on both sides. What would be the pros and cons, for example, working with federal versus state versus private? I have my experiences, but you've seen it from all sides. Do you have like one best aspect and one worst aspect of working with entities at those different levels?
I mean, they each have their place in this. I mean, from the federal side, everything from DoD contracts and grants. We do a lot of NIH contracts now that we're at University of Montana. I think we're up to $60 or $70 million in new NIH contracts, not grants, since we started in 2016, which is great. But you have to understand the federal PHS regulations around government contracting. There's a lot of FAR language and a lot of flow down and small business subcontracting plans. There's a lot of administrative burden that comes along with those, but they can be great if you can get into that system. And administrative supplements. I mean, we keep doing administrative supplements on COVID and opioid and other things that are much easier to do in the contracts space. But just like DoD, I imagine we don't do a lot of DoD government contracting. You're going to have to figure out how it works. And once the DoD is comfortable that a university understands government contracting, it brings more government contracts because now they can trust that you have the administrative infrastructure to do it right. I think so. The disadvantage is making sure that you get that infrastructure right. So if you get an audit, you'll pass it for all those aspects. But from the private company side, obviously there's, partnering with pharma companies to do the same type of thing through collaborative research agreements or contract research agreements that come into the university, come with their own challenges because they have an army, an entire team of legal staff and IP attorneys, and they will wordsmith the document to the point where you have to understand what every term and every definition is because there's loopholes throughout it. And we've gotten into trouble before, even at a company, doing an MTA and then having somebody patent uses around your technology that prevents you from doing anything with anybody other than that one pharma partner because they were smarter about the MTA than we were. And so
sorry guys, I have a question. I know I didn't mean to interject. If there is still kind of it's funny. My brother is an intellectual property attorney as well and kind of corporate law. And I think that's I'm going to emphasize whenever you can, to bring in that corporate counsel with an IP experience, even small business, it will be worth it. But I also had a question from Brian, and I wanted to make sure Brian Nickel had a question. Brian, if you're still available, I wanted to make sure I'm going to unmute you.
Oh, cool. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can
Awesome.
hear you. Jay and Quentin, if you're game for a question in our after, I'm calling this the after hours. We'll record it, let people see it afterwards.
I know we lost a few people in here, and I had to step out for a moment or two myself, but I am work for Harvey's Plumbing and Heating in Bozeman. Bob Harvey owns a small business there, and I am myself alum of Montana State. I went to school for the School of Architecture. I got a master's degree in architecture, and I've recently moved to Boise, but I work remotely for Bob on developing software through the Azure DevOps platform. And so all of our code is cloud hosted, and I have about 4 different coders across the globe, basically, that are crowdsourcing the project. I have one in Egypt, India, and Brazil. And some of the things that the gentleman before, I think his name was David, before he left, David Scott, he had basically like making sure that you're not doing open source software and stuff like that. Bob had sent me a link actually to this SBIR, and I'm familiar with what you guys have done in the past. So I'm going to do a little bit more research on my end. But I think we have an idea that fits within the emergency workforce from Montana State. As a small subcontractor, he struggled hiring and acquiring people out of school because not many go to school to be a plumber. And so we're working on software to help kind of digitize that experience of learning plumbing. So we're kind of a set of tools that automate his schooling process. And I guess, you know, we're reaching a point where we're one sole proprietor for that company. So one sole, he's the investor, I'm the idea guy pretty much. And we're looking at getting to the next step of, we know we have a really good idea. We just know who we're going to market it to get grants for it potentially. And so that's the thing I'm struggling with as a new company is what are the next steps when we come in? And I'm sure that this is much like a very open-ended question, but just as a single or, you know, dual LLC for this, that's kind of where we're struggling at this point is really, you know, we have the capacity to do it internally, but we would like to partner growth ultimately. We just don't know what our next steps are. Hope that was clear.
Gotcha. So this is Quentin. I'm just going to dive in real quick, if you don't mind. And first off, it was Brian. Did I get that right?
Yes, it's Brian.
Go Cat. Yeah, and I think we've used Harvey's personally. So sign me up because I could always use some help learning how to plumb.
Very cool.
It's awful. So a couple resources. You know, Anne is of course a resource for those types of federal awards. Another resource you have locally here as an alumni of MSU, and the same goes for any alum of U of M, is the Launchpad entities. So Trevor Huffmaster manages the Launchpad here at Montana State, and the goal there is to help folks who are entrepreneurs, and they're exactly in the position you're in. How do I grow? What's the next step? What do I need to consider? So he's a great networking tool. If you're a UM alum, that individual would be Paul Gladden. I always mispronounce his last name. Yeah, but also great resources. And that's why they're there, is to help folks in your position. And it sounds like, you've got a really interesting product. David Scott, again, he's got a lot of nice software experience, and it's kind of for free because he really just wants to help folks. The next step really depends once you start diving in, like what's your goal? There's lots of questions that these folks are going to ask. Have you done your customer discovery yet? Who do you think would buy this? There's a process that you can work through. And Trevor, for you locally here at MSU, ping me. My email's in the chat box, awesome. Or you can find him through the MSU Launchpad.
Yeah, Brian, I can send that to you too. Copy it, everybody.
Thank you, Ann, and thank you, Quentin. One thing I forgot to mention is I actually teach college remotely as well. So I'm an educator through the Montana State system. And I don't know if there's some sort of opportunity being an educator, but that's one thing that's really empowered our business is being able to attract some of the the community college and to give back to the community that way. But I just wanted to lay that out there as part of my experience, is that I am connected to the Montana State University system. My third year of teaching will be this semester. So, yeah.
So I can comment because I have no background on software patenting and protection. It's not what we do in our business. But being at the University of Montana and seeing, everything going online, the struggles with COVID and how these universities are operating, knowing that, they just built a Missoula College right next to the University of Montana for 2-year programs, different associate's degrees, certificate programs. A lot of those are based on trades, not your typical 2-4-year degree. I think there's an opportunity in, plumbing or any trade. If you have a tool or technology that allows you to do an online type of course system to allow for a certificate program that could bring in tuition dollars to universities, rather than licensing it out of the universities, you could think about a way to license it back into universities, allowing access to that online software program, allowing them to offer a certificate program, and then they get tuition dollars in for credit. It would be and being an educator yourself, you can see how that would work, I think.
That's an interesting point, because I actually have courses that they've generated into books, but it hasn't been upgraded into a digital tool. And so that's somewhere where we see opportunity is with the code writers of generating kind of a 3-dimensional learning tool with them as well. So
I would encourage you. I don't know if it's out there or not, but I know with all of the COVID stuff that's going on, I know a lot of a big part of the congressional appropriations are going to education and figuring out a way to get classroom-based education into online education. I'd have to do some searching. I know there's a DoD site on it. I know there's an IU site on it. There's probably SBIR or similar grants available for translating classroom technologies into virtual technologies. And it sounds like this type of the approach you're taking could apply directly there for that. So there's probably a lot more money available today than there was 3 months ago.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Brian, you're in the right place. I think you're in the right team, because I think with the MSU connections, and obviously U of M or not, but since MSU, Trevor would be great in terms of getting that kind of initial customer discovery story. That we coach people all the time, because the end game of SBIR is commercialization. So that customer discovery, who would be end user, who would actually buy this in the end, knowing that might already have kind of that in. If you could, have Trent and team at Gallatin College talk to you about, being a first pilot, proof of concept type of testing area, I think would be brilliant, perhaps. That could be an important story as you're preparing an SBIR proposal. But I always tell this to almost every single client that we have. SBIR is not, you have a great thing. Whether you get SBIR funding or not, we're hopeful that we can help you, and if it's a good fit for you to get SBIR funding to help advance this technology, get it to market. But that doesn't just because someone doesn't mean that they shouldn't pursue that. So as Jay mentioned, there's a lot of other types of funding that's out there. Often I can spend some time and pull some top of mind things that I can find that are related to COVID, as Jay mentioned. It's right. There are SBIRs that are related to COVID, helping alleviate all of these issues around COVID, and online learning is one of them. So connect with, go to the MontanaInnovationPartnership.org site. There's a contact us or a request service. Take a and we can set up some time to talk later. And then also I can send you Trevor's information as well, because I think Trevor and I work a lot together as well, helping with your.
Thank you very much.
You bet. That's a great point. So thanks. Kind of where do we start? We've got 9 minutes before the bottom of the hour. I guess it is 1:30. So we've been doing hours, Ed, here. But we were probably a good idea to let people take a break, and then some of the additional panelists for the next panel will be joining us. Patty's been on. We'll next time as well, and everybody can stay. We're looking forward to everybody joining. So we'll make our introductions in another 8 minutes or so.
Okay. Hey, Ann, I just want to say thanks again for having me. I'm going to sign off. I got to go get some work done. But thanks again. I look forward to connecting again. If anybody who's still listening, my email's in there. If I can be of service, feel free to reach out. Dedicated public servant here. So, whatever we can do to help you and find you. If I don't know the answer, we'll try and, like Ann said, we'll try and connect you with the folks who can get you where you need to be.
Thanks so much, Clint. Really appreciate it. Thanks for your feedback.
Hey, Ann.
Yeah.
This is Jay. I'm going to sign off because, as you know, I'm out this week. And actually, don't feel bad for me though. I'm sitting at the shores of Lake Coeur d'Alene in a cabin, so as wife. So
I might try to get up to Priest Lake. I might try to squeeze a couple of days in there later this week up at Priest. So
don't feel bad for me. I'm going to go out and go spend some time with my family. But if anybody has questions, it's related to company startup, getting technology out of universities, how to deal with pharmas and licensing, pharma companies licensing, feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm happy to help.
Thank you, Jay. Really appreciate it. Enjoy Coeur d'Alene. That's a great
Thanks.
lake. Thanks, everyone. And hi, Dave. Good to see you. I can see you now. Thanks. Patty's on and Christy. So I think Les is going to be able to join. He said probably after 1:30. So started kind of giving people a break. We went after hours after the last one. I can't because you just can't shut Clinton up. But it's off, so I can't. Christy's left.
Ann, this is Christy.
Yes.
Hey, Ann, I don't know if I had to pop away for a little bit, but now I'm back. If anyone has any general questions about SBIR while we're waiting for the next panel to start, I'm here and happy to answer questions. So
sure.
If people have things rolling around in your head, there's folks out here. We can keep talking.
Yeah, I'm trying to think there we go. With virtual training. I have some questions for Brian, I think. Brian, if he's still on. I'm just going to grab all the chats before we go. I think we actually went after hours, Christy, after folks left. We ended up having a little bit more of a discussion with some questions that kind of came in. So, but yeah, if you have questions right now, we certainly have a few minutes, and then we can also address them after and or during the next panel. And I will watch. I'm going to try to, and actually, Brittany, I know Brittany, you're on mute right now, but Brittany, I'm going to ask for just a second. If you watch the chat, if you see a new question come in, let us know.
Okay,
Check
sounds good.
if it's popping in. Thanks, Brittany.
Yeah.
Okay, I see. Tom is not being let in as a panelist. I'm going to. Okay, Tom wants to try to join. Let me get him. Make sure I can. Let me see. I'm going to try to send a little invite to Tom to see if I can get in here. One moment.
It looks like we do have a question, Anne.
Thank you. You want to read it off and I'll.
Yeah. It says, hi, I'm having a tough time getting a hold of my PO and the NIH SBIR application is due at the beginning of September. I know the PO is short on time, but how do I obtain early crucial guidance?
Did you hear that, Christy? Or that's online too. So
I did. It's so I guess I would say, how are you trying to reach the PO? Are you emailing or are you trying to telephone? And so whoever asked that question, what route are you trying?
Email.
Okay, so because it's 3 weeks or so before the solicitation closes, the program managers or point of contact folks get really, really busy. So I guess it's not a huge surprise that there's been some delay in reaching them. How many days have you waited, and how many times have you tried?
there. Oh, so in Q&A, okay.
Looks like 2 weeks and 5 times.
Wow, that's crazy. So, Anne, I think I would coach this person to call the help desk.
Yeah.
And to find out who else they might talk to if the program manager isn't responding. Because you really, everyone deserves to have their questions answered before they submit, but it's not a right, so it's more of a privilege. Most program managers, Anne and I find, are very responsive, so it's unfortunate that you've run into a stumbling block here. It could be that your program manager is out and they haven't, put the little notice on their email and you're really trying to reach someone who's not there at all, or they're not in that position anymore. But if you call the help desk and find out the best route to find someone to answer your questions, maybe there's another person who has time to reach back to you. Anne, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a great point. And Serena, it can certainly help look at other, often most of the institutes and centers have multiple people that are overseeing their SBIR programs. So sometimes just reaching out to the kind of person within that institute or center SBIR program, and they may be able to shake things up. Or maybe, I guess Christy said, I shouldn't have even gone to that program officer. So I'd take a look at it.
Are your programs, excuse me, and I was going to ask, are the problems you're experiencing related to the technology, to the uploading, or are you having some concerns about how the application is being processed, or is it questions about the content of the application? That could mean different people. And I can't see the responses coming up here.
Serena, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to unmute you. So maybe you can go ahead, and I think you've just been unmuted. Serena, do you want to
yes
or clarify? Great.
Yes, hi. Yes, so it is help on the content itself. So we had an initial conversation with the PO back, I want to say about a month ago, where they provided some initial guidance. So this is our second time applying. Previously, we applied to an IDDK, applying a second time now to the NIMHD. And so initially we got some feedback on, this is how you need to align with the NIMHD, which we incorporated, and I send the specific aims back out again to now see, okay, are we on the right track? Are we getting closer to what he was expecting from us? And so to that end, I haven't gotten much of a response
yet. Shirlene, are you a Montana company?
I'm not a Montana company, no, ma'am.
Oh, darn it. We'd love to help you with that very specifically. Go ahead, Anne. And I know it's also 1:30, so.
Yeah, I'm gonna kick us off. Shireen, what I'd love you to do is send me a quick email. And what I'll do is make sure with your state and where you're at, I'll help you. And I'm also going to make sure I put you in touch with someone in your state who can kind of continue to help you with some support. So a quick note, and we'll take care of this. I'll kind of look into this afternoon or tomorrow morning.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, hey, everyone, thank you. Welcome. I wanted to kick off we've had a great day of really informative morning panels. Our previous panel, we went into after hours. Good conversation about technology transfer. I I welcome all of your questions. That this has been really helpful and good interactive. So thank you for joining, and thank you for those who are joining now, new, fresh for this second panel. This panel, we're really wanting to focus on what are those steps. So getting those first SBIR, what do you do to really make sure that you're setting yourself up for the best success to commercialize that technology? And there's a lot of components to that. Getting those first sales, finding some additional development funding, perhaps, either whether it's SBIR or some other type of funding source, and also considering private equity as an option to help scale your business, and looking at those services that can help you as an early young company scale your business, grow your manufacturing, things like that. So with that, I wanted to introduce you to Ed Case. Ed Case is also one of the consultants that helps me support Montana companies and DoD companies for TechLink on occasion with SBIR support, proposal reviews, and guidance. He's also been participated and helped with pitch competitions, Air Force accelerators. So he's very good at helping these early stage companies with looking at all of these different types of options. And Ed, I'll go ahead and pass it off to you and let you introduce our guest panelists for today. Thanks so much.
Okay, well, thanks, Ann. So actually, I was going to let the panelists introduce themselves because I probably wouldn't do justice to your background. And so I'd like you to do is just a real short introduction of who you are and then what your experience is with technology commercialization, whether that's SBIR or just technology commercialization in general. So we will start with Les and we'll kind of move through people from there.
Great. And as for joining, I'm sorry to interject real quick. There is one gentleman who's on our team, Tom Walker with the Small Business Development Center, who's having a little bit of issue. I'm going to go off and try to tech support that. So we'll get to Tom's introduction a little bit later. But maybe Dave Elpitz, you could start. I'm doing from my vision from top to bottom here. Dave?
Hi, I'm Dave Opitz. I started off, I guess, early as a computer science professor at the University of Montana for a number of years, and spun off some research through an SBIR company I started, and that was Visual Learning Systems about 20 years ago. And we looked at a software application of using machine learning to learn features in satellite imagery and put them in GIS databases, and worked a lot with the DoD and other federal government agencies. So along the way, we had it started off with NASA Phase 2 SBIR in 2001. And then we had 6 other Phase 2s along the way, adding different functionality to our equipment. Had a lot of commercialization and software sales of those products back to those agencies and other agencies, or commercial companies that were supported by those. So a lot of it was still fed by the federal government, state governments. And then we sold our company in 2006. And right now I'm looking at starting another machine learning company on tech transfer, or not tech transfer, transfer learning from one domain to another.
Okay, great. Thanks. Les, you want to go next?
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. My name is Les Craig. I'm a partner at Next Frontier Capital, which is an early stage venture capital firm located in Bozeman. We also have offices in satellite office in Missoula and an office in Boulder, Colorado now. And we invest in early stage technology companies in the Intermountain West, Colorado, Utah, Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming. My background and experience with tech commercialization, tech transfer really began when I got out of the Army in 2008. I spent some time at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, where I worked on a few commercialization projects related to the Army. And after that, I started a cybersecurity company that actually commercialized research that came out of University of Oxford, out of the Network Science Center. Since then, I also worked at Montana State University very closely with the Tech Transfer Office. And currently, our fund, we have 26 investments in our portfolio, across our portfolio, 2 funds. 2 of those companies are actually SBIR funded companies in the early days. So that's me.
Great, thanks. Okay, Patty, you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Patty Fleming. I'm with the Montana Manufacturing Extension Center, which is part of the National Institute of Standard and Technology's Manufacturing Extension Partnership. There's a center like ours in every state. My background is I did about 10 years of helping the companies prepare for sale and doing turnarounds. During that time, I did work with one company, and we commercialized technology that we developed with an SBIR out of DOE. I also have several years of experience as being a technical point of contact for the SBIR program for SOCOM and also for the SBIR program for Marine Corps. Just to be clear, manufacturing is defined as adding value to something that is physical. So we do not help and do not have expertise to help software. So.
Oh. I was trying to unmute you as you were muting yourself. We were going back and forth.
Okay, so looks like we're still waiting.
Yeah, I'm trying to resolve the technical issues with Tom Walker. I'll see if I can go in a different way and get his. It's not allowing him in, so I'll continue to work with that. But
okay, well, we'll press forward then. Just to so there's a lot of different aspects of what technology commercialization is. It's knowing what your customer's problem is. It's finding an understanding of the market. It's finding the right price point. It's delivering things at scale. So we're going to kind of touch on those things and see what questions come in along the way as well. I want to start with kind of the customer discovery part, figuring out what the customer's problem is and how do you find a way to productize that solution. So I'm going to start with Dave again. What do you think what was kind of your customer discovery process, either with VLS or with the company you are now? How did you know you had something that people wanted?
Well, I was working on, for myself, a number of different projects at the university, and one of them I was working with NASA on trying to automate finding volcanoes on Venus, and I had a person in Helena that said, well, if you turn the sensors back to the Earth, there's more money to be had. So he was the commercialization guy that we kind of started the company with. And so we looked from the beginning as SBIR as being the way. And he had a pretty good handle, at least at what the GIS folks were looking for and what the bottleneck was in terms of finding information from imagery. And then along the way, for a solution for it, you have to know a lot about what the current, for a software company anyhow, what the current workflow is. And people have their standard workflow, and you can't just come in there and expect that you're going to replace it. And so we had to figure out, well, how are they doing it? And then what are ways that we can enhance what they're doing at the beginning, and then went to NASA a few times, and we started off with the TechLink project and had a CRADA with NASA. So that helped at least find out what NASA wanted. That developed into a phase 1, and then during a phase 1, it's the same thing, right? You have your customer. Your customer is the agency that's funding you, and it's important that you go out there and meet, or in today's world, maybe Skype with the project manager, and find out a lot about exactly where your technology would fit in, what they want to see on phase 1, and what they would fund on phase 2. So that's really your customer at that point. And then during that process, usually in phase 1, they'll say, go out here and talk to different customers, end users, I'll say, at this point to find out what they want, and that comes into your commercialization strategy, and then that goes into phase 2. And so what we found along the way is even when you knew what they wanted, how we wanted to fit in, and we just became extensions to people's current workflow so that we would enhance it and not replace it. And we had a commercialization strategy with that. You still find out that you're working in a lab, you create the software, you think it's the best thing in the world, you put it in front of a customer, and they don't know what some of the buttons are, they get confused, and the stuff that you thought was gold is stuff that they think is garbage, and they want to change it. And so even that process continually throughout that process, it's a matter of saying, with your product, how does it best fit with the customer? And that's always an ongoing talk.
Okay, great. So that's kind of the same question, although if you want to answer it more from what do you as an investor look at, because that's another avenue with people with SBIRs. At some point, they grow beyond SBIR, so they need outside capital. So you can answer it from the SBIR standpoint, from the investor standpoint, or whatever makes you comfortable.
Great. Yeah. So first of all, I'll start kind of the answer by just saying I think the SBIR vehicle is, and you can hear this from every investor, but I think it's a phenomenal source of early stage capital for technology companies to consider. The risk is that you don't start this sort of a cycle of funding with the customer in mind. And so the challenge is, I think, where you see companies, when companies get SBIR funding and they immediately focus on what gets them excited, unquestionably, the research. If you focus on the research, you're probably going to enter into a perpetual cycle of being an SBIR funded company. And so I think if you start from the beginning thinking about the customer, I think you have a greater chance of truly commercializing technology in the long run. And so, I think when you think about customer discovery, there's a couple different ways you can approach that. And what we like to see as an investor is, well, number one, if you are the customer, perhaps you come from an industry where you recognize this problem that you felt firsthand. That's great. Like from an investor perspective, we love to see that. Number two, maybe it's a little bit more adjacent than that. Maybe it's just, the customer. Maybe you worked in a lab or you worked somewhere where in an environment, an industry where you saw this problem, you observed it, maybe didn't feel it directly, but ultimately it still gets back to that idea of you're starting with a problem you're solving a customer's problem. And, the worst thing you can do, when I started my first company, which was a cybersecurity firm called Red Owl Analytics, we started with amazing, unbelievable research, some of the most cutting edge network science going on in the world at that time. And we basically created an amazing solution that was in search of a problem. And so this is another dilemma. Like that's something as an investor, we don't want to see. I mean, it's kind of, it sets you into an eternal path of trying to, discover your customer. So I think, ultimately what it really gets back to is customer discovery really gets to business value, right? So how can I identify who my customer is in a very specific way? How can I either save that customer money or make them money? And making money doesn't always mean necessarily, it's not always directly transferable. Same thing with saving money. I mean, sometimes you're helping improve scale, increase margins, saving time, saving costs, those sorts of things. So ultimately, that's what it gets back to. When you start the process, if you want an investor to be interested in the future, you've got to really truly start with that customer in mind and specifically solving that customer's problem.
Okay. So Patty, a little different question on customer discovery. How does customer discovery help the companies that come to you?
Well, first of all, Ed, we provide a service called Technology-Driven Marketplace Intelligence. We do that with our partner Research Triangle Incorporated. Here we try to analyze various industries that your technology could be used for. A lot of times technology that's developed could be in various industries. So an example of that, we recently did one with a company that developed a new vision technology, analyzed the situation, found that Montana has the highest number of acres of organic crops under till in the United States. This gentleman was from that industry as well. And so we decided that we would target the first industry would be organic farming, where this vision system could be used to identify weeds in organic crop before it is combined. And as Les was indicating, that's of value to the farmers. And we actually interviewed several farmers and tried to validate what the value would be to them by not having weed seeds go into their organic crops. And then after that is determined, once you've decided what industry you're going to go after, it really affects how the product is designed. So if you can have that information, including the market size and the potential pricing, we can really design a product that fits the customer and solves the customer's problems, and also uses the correct manufacturing process based on the market size.
Okay, great. It looks like Tom has joined us, so I'm going to have Tom give a quick intro, and he can tack on to that. So we're talking about customer discovery. So kind of when people come to you, where are they usually in the customer discovery process, and how do you get them pointed in the right direction? So intro and that question I'll throw at you. I think you're still muted.
I'm Tom Walker. I'm the Regional Director of the Small Business Development Center for Gallatin and Park counties. And my background is primarily finance. And in my role at SBDC, we help people start a business, grow a business, and I tend to focus on financing a business or buy-sell a business. And so a lot of times I've worked with a number of SBIR recipients and other tech companies. I'm actually an angel investor myself, and I'm on the investment committee for Fund 3 at Frontier Angels, which is the largest angel group in Montana. So customer discovery, I think is critical, as Les and Patty pointed out. You may or may not change the focus in the early stages of the company, but it's important to try to figure out what value are you adding, what are those customers looking to buy, how do you segment those customers, what other vertical markets can you approach, right? So it's not just one market, there's probably many vertical markets. And I'm working in an agricultural space right now, and it looks like a secondary product that the company is developing, a starch actually, is probably going to be a more valuable product. So one of the things to keep in mind is don't fall in love with the immediate product. Let your customers tell you what they're interested in, and that's how we came up with this this starch issue. So that's I think it's an interactive process, and particularly on the SBIR side, I think companies should try to engage with potential customers as early as possible to get as much feedback as possible. And that's something that I've encouraged and I've seen work pretty well.
Okay, great.
It helps, guys. Just a quick interjection. I know Dave was on a webinar with us a while ago, which was really very helpful. And part of your SBIR proposal is going to be that commercialization plan. And for many of you, you're like, I'm just getting started. How do I identify my customer? It's really important for you to do that, because if you don't ahead of time, you're going to be guessing. You're going to be putting things, as David put it, like naive commercialization data in there. And Christy and I and others have worked with companies who they get feedback from the reviewers saying, boy, this looks great technically, but they're way off the mark on their plan. I don't know where they're coming from. And part of it is being able to really tell the stories that you've gotten from those interviews. So I can't stress enough that I know you're all ready to go, but wait until the next round if you haven't done any customer discovery. So that's my 2 cents on that. So thanks you guys for that. That was really great information.
Okay, great. So let's talk a little bit about revenue. I'm going to jump in with, we'll go to Les. So as an investor, what revenue story makes you feel kind of comfortable?
Yeah, well, the easy answer there is it depends. But you know, it's fascinating because when you think about, to put this in the context of, you know, of SBIR or frankly any non-dilutive funding sources that are used for an early seed stage company, there comes a point when you make that transition to an equity investment. And generally that's going to be I'd say usually at such an early stage that it's not as metric driven as some of the later stage, some of the growth stage equity. And frankly, nowadays it's getting, you know, even like a Series A, Series B, a lot of the metrics, that used to be considered early stage venture. They're almost taking one out of the playbook of private equity now, where they're waiting to see more kind of, you know, revenue based metrics and those sorts of things before they write a check. What I would say for investors, that when you're making this transition from SBIR, non-dilutive funding, into an equity investor at seed stage, it's actually, there's something a little more important than revenue, but revenue becomes kind of a good signal for that, and it's really product market fit. So it's really, how can I get confident or convicted that you've discovered your customer, and now you're discovering really your product market fit. And, you know, for us, I would say that the net number isn't as important as it is, number one, that people are actually paying for the product, right, or services, right? Number two, that you've got a good handle generally on what the market will bear in terms of price, how you're pricing, you know, what the pricing model is. Is this a recurring revenue model that has a very high quality of revenue? Or is it transactional? Is it, you know, you buy one of these machines or hardware pieces for $50,000 and it's a one and done? So it's really understanding your revenue as early as it may be. It's understanding what it is. Generally for us, we do like to see kind of our hurdle is around, you know, $40,000 to $60,000 a month in monthly recurring revenue. And once again, that's kind of a finger in the wind, but what's more important is that you're able to use your revenue numbers and some of your other numbers around your revenue, you know, you know, what the number is, to actually validate that you've got product market fit, which is much more important from the investor standpoint.
Okay, so let's move to Dave. So Dave, you went through this with VLS.
Mm-hmm.
What did your revenue history look like? Did you have revenue before the SBIR, or how long did it take after the SBIR before you started to have revenue?
No, we didn't. It was, I was at the university, and Stuart had his private company. And so that was kind of that was their day job, and their night job was to get the company going. And so we started our effort through TechLink on one of their tech launch grants. It was $25,000 to help pay, get to NASA, work with them, get the customer on board a little more. And then we went to the phase one. And once we got that and then had the phase two, then we started hiring people, and our company started going. One of the things I do want to touch on with, as you asked, was, you know, toward the end of your phase two, that's when it gets hard to commercialize. And that's the most important part. And when I say it's hard, it's that you have a revenue dip at the end of your funding for the phase two funding, and it's really early to get customer money typically. And that depends on obviously your sales cycle, how expensive your product is, if you have to manufacture or not. You know, software, it was easy for us. But you still have that revenue dip, and you have employees, and you're saying, okay, how do I start making money from the customer? And then, you know, do you have another research contract coming in and stuff like that? So for us, we burned through our phase two pretty fast, and we got to the market just to show people a prototype, get feedback. Forest Service bought a bunch of beta copies from us to kind of get going, because it immediately solved a problem for them. And we had a couple others too, but you know, not a lot. And so then we started looking at, do we need to get you know, different equity funding coming in? And at the time, there really wasn't any angels or VC fund. John Markey had one with a few people that was pretty informal. And so we went and talked with them, and then they had to get things together. Well, about 6 months later, they came back and said, yeah, we want to fund you, but we were already on to our next, we did get some funding that came in, and another research grant that came in. And we were right in the middle of September 11th. We had everything set to go, and we had the DOD out actually on the morning of September 11th to get ready for a different phase 2 project. And by the end of the morning thing, they said, we want to fund you, but I can tell you based on what's going on, our money just dried up, and it did. And so it took, you always have the real world circumstances that come in through that. So you have to figure out how to on the revenue side, how to overcome those different hurdles. And then the last thing I'll say on this, in terms of the revenue, when you look at going to get the funding, the non-diluted funding, or you want to go to get angel venture capital money, if you're doing the SBIR process, it's a long process. And so I'm trying to, it was that way with us, but it was fine because we had different jobs and we were going to do both companies at the same time. And it gave us a way to jump in there. And right now, when I'm looking at it, I sent in a proposal to NSF almost 6 months ago, and it was supposed to be a 6-week turnaround, and I'm still waiting for a response. And so it's not 9/11, it's COVID this time, that reared its head. And so I'm waiting for them to get around to it, to get a response for that. And meanwhile, your idea out on the market, time is churning. You get the phase 1, that's 6 to 9 months. You got another 3 months after that, and then you have 2 years to do your phase 2. So from your idea to the end of a phase 2 contract, you're looking at 2.5 years, maybe more, of what you want to do. And you have to decide, is that what you want, is that the right way to go? But at the same time, until you have a customer, like Les was saying, that's willing to pay for it, the customer could be the federal agencies that are giving you the research contracts because they find what you have, or better yet, they're buying your widgets. That takes time too. So, it's the trade-off.
Okay. So Tom, when companies come to you, what kind of questions do they have about generating revenue?
The orientation of the people that I've seen that are pursuing SBIRs is typically technical in nature, academic, super smart, but probably limited on the business side. And so what I usually suggest is that they find advisors, form advisory boards, mentors, and there's sort of a building ecosystem of that kind of activity in the area. And that will help guide them to think about strategically, how do they obtain revenue? Who are the types of customers? And then, David made a great point also, which is minimum viable product. So the Forest Service bought a couple of beta prototypes because it solved their problem, right? Well, that's great. You learn a tremendous amount from that, and cash early is always great because it supports the investment thesis, product market fit, all the things Les was talking about. So, I think that it's a big challenge to sort of do both, have the technical chops to win the SBIR type funding, but then think about the business execution side. But there's plenty of resources out there to support that.
Okay. So Patty, how does revenue play into the advice you give to people? How do they scale? I mean, what do they need to get started, and don't they need to kind of know what their target volume is to really do a good job there?
Absolutely. So revenue is demand times customer pricing. So those are the two numbers that are most important to the engineering and the manufacturing part of the commercialization plan. If we have very incorrect numbers on those, we can make huge and costly mistakes. We might design the product to be injection molded because we think it's going to be 100,000 units. when it turns out that there's 50 units. And now we've just purchased a injection molder, and we've wasted a whole lot of engineering time when it turns out we should have done it with 3D printing or some other form of manufacturing. So that is the biggest thing for the engineering and the manufacturing side of it. Also, one thing I would say too is the initial prototypes from when I was on the Marine Corps and the SOCOM SBIR team are so important. If you can put out an initial prototype, it needs to look as much like the final product as possible. I've seen so many that have cardboard, duct tape, hanging wires, and aluminum foil. And that just sends a wrong message to not only your SBIR investors, but future investors as well. So when it comes to bringing in outside funding or bootstrapping, my personal recommendation would be obviously go to your bank first, and if that doesn't work, try bootstrapping an initial test run where you can get some valuable test data from potential customers who are willing to try out your product. And if not, then you need to talk to guys like Les.
Great. So assuming that now you know what your customer wants and you have a product, how do you scale? So we'll go right back to Patty. So you kind of touched on this, but what's the biggest challenge that the companies face in starting to produce things in quantity?
Again, back to, did you have a very good, accurate forecast? So let's say you did. Then you also need to have a very good manufacturing process that ensures that you've got a great quality product. Putting out say 10 test units that all fail in the field just destroy your reputation. And then it's costly to replace them. So a good quality management system when you start to manufacture is crucial. Marketing, which goes back to kind of what we talked about, knowing how to get into a sales channel is huge. My experience is that researchers are damn good at researching, probably not very good at marketing. So if you need help with marketing, get it. If you need help with engineering, get it, and focus on what you're good at.
Okay. So same kind of question. So people need to scale. What are kind of the good signs and the bad signs you see when someone comes to you at this point?
Yeah, I think to sort of boil that question down into the basics, I think the good signs are generally founders that really know and understand what they want to be. When they make this transition to commercialization, what's tricky is if you don't have clearly defined goals in terms of your long-term ambitions. For instance, do you want to grow and scale a company and become a global company that sells internationally? Do you want to just dominate a market in your home state? Those are two kind of extreme examples, but everything about everything in the middle. It's like you have to understand really what you want to be when the company grows up. And then what that translates to is really the variables that help you scale. And I kind of think of it as sort of a three-legged stool. There's sufficient capitalization of the company. They're basically the resources that you're going to use to scale. Mentorship for growth. How are you going to? Because generally it's probably going to be your first time going at this. If and if it isn't, even we all need mentors, right? So you're going to need to surround yourself with the right network of people to grow. And then the third thing is you're going to have to, attract the right talent. You're going to have to attract team members as you grow. So, I think about that as if you know what type of company you want to be, and generally you have your handle around those three variables for scale, then it really becomes, sort of finding an investor or a source of capital that can enable that growth. And I think a lot of times this is where a good sign is when an entrepreneur, someone that's looking to commercialize, their research, has really thought very decisively about who the right investor is. Do your homework on the investor just as much as you want to present your best, foot forward. You've got to know who's going to be investing in you and make sure that it's a good fit for their portfolio and their investment strategy. So.
Okay. So Dave, what did scaling look like at VLS?
Well, manufacturing was easy. It's software and you hit copy and then you burn it. For us, we burn it to a disk or you put it back on the web page. But the scaling, in a larger sense, was more along the lines of building partnerships. That was really important for us, that we wanted to have our software, what Les was talking about, what scope do you want to do? And we wanted to do, obviously, international. We ended up having international resellers, and quite a few of them. And so we really focused on scaling our product by having partnerships. And so we had our product as an extension to the top 2 GIS platforms and the top 2 image processing platforms. And then we worked hard on getting them to recognize us and be a reseller for us. So the largest one was ESRI. They have 2,500 business partners. And at that time, they resold 3, and we ended up being one of those. And so that was a big deal for us, and it really kind of allowed us to scale. And so that, when we looked at that, that's how we scaled, was through partnerships. And then, for internally, the team building we did, it was a lot of people I hired from the university. The first 5 people were people who had done masters with me. And so then we kept bringing people in and made sure they really fit well personally with the team. And then having the customer, I guess the end user, the last point I'll make on this is scaling by kind of having the customer help us get the vision of the product. So Patty had mentioned earlier, you get something out there and it fails, your first-time customer, it gives you a black mark and stuff. And then how do you overcome that? How do you redo the manufacturing? For us, how we did that was for software, you really do have to get it out there pretty early, but you get out there in the beta, you have the expectation set with the customer that they are a partner with us. And if you find the right mentality, which in our case is what's known as the early adopters, you find the people who are the early adopters, they really like to shape and work with the company if they allow them that. And then when you take their feedback, they become really your best salesman from there on out. And so that helped us scale as well.
Okay. So Tom, when people need to scale, what kind of things are they looking for, and how does the SBDC really help them along there?
Frankly, we don't see too many companies that are really trying to scale. Most of the companies that I deal with are kind of localized focused. We have some that are regional players, very few that have aspirations to go national or international. So the SBDC tends to not focus as much on the high tech companies. The ones that I've had the opportunity to work with, though, another concept that you might think about is how do you scale virtually? How do you scale through partnerships, contract manufacturing? How do you avoid having to, invest more capital? How do you get more out of those partnerships? Even if you're giving up part of the revenue stream, you have to also be pretty cognizant of the intellectual property issues. So, I think scaling for, particularly in the biotech space, some of the medical stuff, the cost to scale are so high that going through partnerships and working with larger companies not only can be a great way to do that, but also, if it's successful, could lead to a buyout a number of times, particularly in the biotech space.
Okay. So we're coming towards the end of our session. I haven't seen any questions come in on the Q&A. So I'm going to invite everyone to just kind of do a closing takeaway. So when tech commercialization, what where do people need to keep their eye on the ball? So we'll go with, we'll start with Tom this time.
I think it's a critical issue. And, you know, Dave highlighted some of the real world challenges of managing sort of these SBIR funds. When do you find customers? And then how do you efficiently go after equity capital, whether it's angel rounds or venture capitals like Les. So it's a pretty complex challenge. You don't want to run too fast because then you'll run out of cash on the commercialization side. But you need to demonstrate the traction, and it's something that you should really have the conversations with mentors and advisors if it's not something you've had a fair amount of experience in. There's plenty of expertise out there, and a lot of people happy to support you.
Okay, Patty, same question.
Sure. I think that every entrepreneur needs to do a real gut check and determine whether or not you want to be a manufacturer. Manufacturing sometimes is not that much fun. I would think most researchers would rather continue researching than managing employees and worrying about downtime. So there's lots of different options you can do. You can go from 100% vertically integrated to making your own corrugated boxes for your own product, or you can go the other direction and license out your technology, or you can contract out your manufacturing. Contracting out your manufacturing is a pretty good way, in my opinion, to start up, and it allows you to do what you like to do, which is research.
Okay. Dave, same question?
Yeah. I'll just say that SBIR is what I think is some of the best money that our government spends, and some of the best money to go after if it fits you. You know, it's free; you don't have to pay it back. There are the problems with it in terms of it's going to be a little bit slow. You're going to get audited over and over again. There's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of proposals you have to put together and get, you know, you're not going to get funded probably right away. And so there's a lot of upfront time, but if it does fit you, it's a really good process. And then the other thing I'll touch on that we didn't get to is when you go into it, you know, what's your exit strategy for what you want to do? Is it something that you want to have as a legacy? Is it a part of your bigger company? For us, we came in from the very beginning knowing we wanted to sell. And so while we were going through the process, we were looking for companies. So when you partner with someone, that's the logical person that's probably going to buy you if it's a large thing and you're building it. For us, we obviously partnered with quite a few, and they knew that, and then it becomes a fairly touchy subject of how do you broach the conversation of we want to exit, are they interested, at the same time saying that we're always going to be there and, you know, selling their product, and do you want to watch out for their competitor, and you're setting up a reseller. So we end up selling to Textron, which was, you know, out of and Lockheed Martin and Northrop were some of the people who had bid as well, and it wasn't anybody that we had ended up partnering with, so you never know. But, you know, when you go in, always keep that in mind is in terms of how you're going to exit. And if you end up getting VC money, they're going to demand that as well, because you got to pay it back.
Oh, that's a perfect segue to Les.
Yeah. Well, we never make you pay it back. We hope you actually, you know, get a multiple on that for everybody that's in the deal. But I couldn't believe I couldn't agree with Dave more on what he said about SBIR funding being some of the greatest money that our government spends. It's such an amazing source of capital for early stage founders, and I think that's why you have to take it very seriously. But where you have to start is you have to start with the end in mind. You have to start with your, you know, what it looks like at the end of the road for you in terms of commercialization. And the reality is, like, none of us can ever script what that path's going to look like moving forward. And so the best advice I can give is like someday you'll be able to piece it all when you look back. But in the meantime, like the best thing to do is get the resources and the team around you to help you, navigate that journey. And frankly, if you're on the webinar today, you're already off on the right foot. So congratulations.
Thanks, Ed. It's actually a great way to wrap everything up. And Ed, did you have any other last thoughts yourself, just in terms of moderating this and your experience?
Lots of thoughts, probably not that we can squeeze into anything concise, but I'm one of the resources that works with Dan's group. So if you're on this webinar and you think that SBIR is a good fit, or you need to discuss whether SBIR is a good fit, there are the resources out there to help you through that. And Christy's still on the line. There's a number of consultants that work with Ann on top of Ann's experience with this. So it's a great source of money, but it is on a 2 or 3 year time frame. So if your window of opportunity is shorter than that, as Dave said, you can still use it, but it can't be your only source of fund. It won't get you there quick enough. So I want to thank the panel. I really appreciate your time. Some great insights on technology commercialization and some of the considerations you need and leverage you pull as you're working through things. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Ann.
Yeah, you guys, thank you everyone on the panel. I so appreciate your time, your commitment and support for our companies. Everybody on the attendees, thank you so much for participating. Feel free to ping me with any questions that you have. Let me know where you are in your SBIR journey, if it's just starting or if you've already received SBIRs. Whatever, wherever you are, we're here to help you and support you. And I can't stress enough, think of that end game. What is it that you want to accomplish? What is the vision that you have for your company? That's going to help you when you decide, 1, whether or not SBIR is right for you, 2, which agency, which solicitation or topic area is maybe a good fit for you. You always want to just make sure that you're looking for the sources of funding that will help you build your company. And it might be SBIR. And if it is, we're here to help you. So with that, everyone, thank you so much. Again, I appreciate your time this afternoon. And this recording, as well as this morning's recordings, will be available. And we'll probably post those a little bit later on in the week. So thanks again, and look forward to talking with you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Les. Thanks, everyone. And I'll watch for questions here if there's anything that kind of comes in after the fact. But thanks, guys, for your time. Okay. Yeah, it looks like everybody's kind of just going off. Thank you so much. That was a great panel. I appreciate your time with that. Okay. And I'll go ahead and end this, and I'll end the recording, and I'll post this up next week.